For millennia, humanity was nothing but a forgotten myth. But today, one crew stumbles upon a secret buried for 4,000 years, a secret that will shake the galaxy to its core. Power beyond imagination, history rewritten, and a choice that will decide the fate of every star. And so, it begins not with a war, but with a discovery that would change everything. The Aurora's Edge drifted slowly through the void, its engines humming faintly as it weaved between jagged asteroids. Space around them was silent, but it was not the comforting silence of empty space. It was the heavy, expectant silence that felt alive, as if the darkness itself was watching. Captain Elias Draven leaned forward in his seat, his weathered hands gripping the armrests. Life as a scavenger had hardened him, stripped away illusions of glory or honor. Out here, survival came down to luck, grit, and the ability to take what others left behind. He had long ago stopped believing in destiny, but the readings on the console were undeniable. Ronan Cade, his engineer and the oldest member of the crew, ran a trembling hand through his gray beard. "Captain, I've never seen anything like this," Ronan muttered, his voice low and rough. "It's not a reactor, it's not a weapon, it's something alive but not alive. The energy signature by the stars. It's like an entire city's heart beating under the rock." Elias frowned. "Alive? Machines don't live, Ronan." Ronan gave him a look that held both fear and fascination. "Maybe this one does." Their ship glided deeper into the asteroid field. Shadows stretched across the hull as massive stones drifted past. The Aurora's Edge was small, fragile in comparison to the towering rocks that could crush it with a careless shift of gravity. Then they found it, a tunnel carved into the heart of the largest asteroid, perfectly smooth and symmetrical. No tool marks, no signs of erosion. It was not natural. The ship entered cautiously, its lights casting pale beams on walls that shimmered faintly, as if the rock itself remembered being touched by something long ago. The deeper they went, the more the crew felt it, an oppressive weight in their chests. A sense that they were intruders walking into a place that had not seen visitors in ages. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, so massive that the ship's lights could not find the ceiling or the far walls. And there in the center, resting in absolute stillness, was the Eclipse Vanguard. Its hull was black, so dark it seemed to drink in the light, bending it into impossible shadows. Strange symbols, etched like veins, traced along its body. Even dormant, it radiated presence, like an emperor sleeping, awaiting the moment to rise again. Dr. Selene Vera, the ship's science officer, floated closer to the viewport, her breath caught in her throat. "Elias, this isn't just a ship. Look at it. It's organic. The structure, it's grown, not built. And these symbols, this language, it's not like anything in Concord records." Cale Rhine, the security officer, kept his hand near his weapon, his eyes scanning the silent giant. "Things buried this long stay buried for a reason. We shouldn't be here." Elias ignored him. He felt something in the air, an unspoken truth, a pull he couldn't explain. It wasn't greed that held him there, it was recognition. The ship responded. Faint lines of blue light rippled along its hull, spreading slowly, deliberately. One by one, the symbols glowed like stars being reborn after eternal night. A low hum filled the chamber, deep and resonant, vibrating through the bones of the crew. Ronan whispered, "It's waking up." Elias's throat tightened. For years, he had fought just to survive, but now, standing before this ancient titan, he felt small, not in a way that humiliated him, but in a way that humbled him. Selene's voice trembled with awe. "This isn't just technology. This is history. This ship, it might be older than the Concorde itself. What else have they hidden from us? What else did humanity once know?" The light intensified, and then a voice, calm, resonant, undeniably intelligent, echoed inside their minds. "Human signatures detected. Identify yourselves." The crew froze. It wasn't a translation. It wasn't some alien tongue reshaped into words. The voice spoke perfect human language. Elias swallowed hard, his heart pounding. I am Captain Elias Draven, salvage vessel Aurora's Edge. Who or what are you?" There was a pause, then the voice replied. "I am Idolin, Command Intelligence of the Eclipse Vanguard. It has been 3,847 years since I last spoke to a human. Welcome home." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Cale stepped back in disbelief. "Home? What the hell is it talking about? Humans barely reached faster than light travel 2 centuries ago." Idolin's voice remained calm. "Incorrect. Your records are incomplete. Humanity once ruled a third of this galaxy. We withdrew not in defeat but in choice." Selene stared at the glowing symbols, her hands trembling. "Withdrew? From what? Why?" "Because our power grew too great. We chose peace over conquest, but now you stand where none have stood in millennia." The question, Captain Elias Draven, is what you will choose next. The chamber pulsed with life as the ancient ship stirred fully, a god waking from a long, self-imposed slumber. And for the first time in centuries, Elias felt something he thought he had lost forever: destiny. But what they found inside the ship was more than technology. It was a voice from a forgotten age, ready to reveal a truth buried for millennia. The interior of the Eclipse Vanguard came alive, its corridors bathed in soft blue light that pulsed like the veins of a living organism. The ship was not just awakening, it was remembering. Eidolon's voice resonated in every corner, deep and calm, as if it carried the weight of millennia. Captain Elias Draven, your genetic markers confirm lineage from the unified human fleet. You have a right to command. The word struck Elias like a hammer. For his entire life, humanity had been seen as a minor species: merchants, miners, scavengers. The Celestian Concord treated human colonies as tolerated dependents, not equals. And now this voice from the past was telling him that humanity had once been far greater. Seleni's eyes shone with both wonder and fear. Eidolon, how old are you? I have existed for 3,847 years, 4 months and 12 days. I was part of the 7th Fleet, stationed in the Persean expansion corridor during humanity's final withdrawal. Kale stepped forward, still gripping his weapon. Withdrawal from what? What are you talking about? There was a brief pause, as if Eidolon was choosing its words carefully. Humanity once held dominion over a third of all inhabited systems. We created worlds, shaped suns, and shared knowledge freely with less advanced civilizations. But our strength became fear. A great war loomed, one that would have annihilated half the galaxy. High Command made a choice. We abandoned power to preserve life. Ronan let out a low whistle, disbelief etched on his face. You're saying we gave it all up, just walked away? Yes, Eidolon replied. Our leaders believed that true strength lay in restraint. They hoped that in time other species would grow as equals and humanity could return as partners, not rulers. Selene traced her hand along a glowing panel, her voice trembling. But that's not what happened. The Concord rose on the ruins we left behind. They rewrote history. They made us small. Eidolon's tone grew heavier, almost mournful. Correct. After humanity's withdrawal, many species took our worlds and technology. They built their civilizations upon the foundations we left. In their records, humanity became myth or threat. The galaxy remembers enough to fear you, but not enough to understand you. Elias felt a storm rising within him. His entire life he had been powerless. Every negotiation with alien traders, every insult flung at human colonists, all of it suddenly felt like a cruel lie. Why tell me this? Elias asked quietly. Because the Eclipse Vanguard still carries 50,000 of your kind in stasis. They have slept as I have, waiting for a time when humanity would reclaim its voice. Captain Elias Draven, your decision will shape the fate of the galaxy. Shall I wake them? The words settled over the crew like a crushing weight. Selene's gaze locked with Elias's, her eyes filled with wonder and terror alike. Elias, if this is true, then every human colony, every child who's been told we are weak, they deserve to know who we were. Kale shook his head sharply. And what happens if we wake them will be seen as a threat. The Concord will never let this stand. They'll try to destroy us before we can even breathe. Ronan muttered, almost to himself, or maybe this is what we've been waiting for all along. Elias looked around at his crew. For the first time, he saw something in their faces he hadn't seen in years, not fear, not despair, but the faint glimmer of possibility. Eidolon's voice came again, solemn and patient. Captain, history waits for the choice of the living. The dead cannot decide. What will you do? Elias closed his eyes for a moment, the enormity of it pressing down on him. Every instinct screamed caution, but deep down something stronger stirred, something that felt older than fear. When he opened his eyes, his voice was steady. Eidolon, wake them. It's time humanity remembers who we are. All around them, the ship rumbled as ancient systems stirred to life. In distant halls, stasis pods began to glow, their occupants stirring after thousands of years of sleep. The age of silence was ending. The choice Elias made next would not only awaken the ship's crew, but awaken a history that the galaxy wanted to forget. The hum of the Eclipse Vanguard deepened, vibrating through the walls like the heartbeat of a giant. The lights inside the colossal ship brightened, casting a bluish glow that felt almost alive. Ancient systems awakened one by one, as though the vessel had simply been waiting for someone to give permission to breathe again. Rows of stasis pods stretched endlessly, each one holding a sleeping figure from a forgotten era. Their surfaces shimmered with frost, and faint wisps of vapor curled upward as the temperature began to shift. Idolin's voice remained calm but carried a new weight. Revival process initiated. Estimated time to awaken first group 12 minutes. Crew count 50,000. Origin United Human Fleet Vanguard Division. Elias stood silently, staring at the glowing pods. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like just a scavenger or a survivor. He felt like a thread in something far larger, something that stretched across the millennia. Selene Vera watched the awakening process, her expression torn between awe and dread. Elias, do you understand what this means? Every history book we've ever read is a lie. They erased us. We weren't weak. We were gods compared to them. Elias didn't answer. His mind swirled with questions about responsibility, about power, about the kind of humanity that had chosen to step back instead of ruling through fear. Cale Rhine broke the silence, his voice low and wary. This is madness. The Concorde will see this as an act of war. You know that, right? The moment these people wake up, we'll have a target on our backs. Ronan Cade, leaning against the railing, gave a humorless chuckle. They already see us as nothing. Maybe it's time they remember what we're capable of if we keep hiding. We'll stay slaves forever. Selene turned sharply toward Cale, and if we do nothing, we let history die. We let them believe we were too weak to shape our own future. Power is dangerous, yes, but so is silence. Cale's jaw tightened. I've fought too many battles to believe power makes people noble. Selene's voice softened. Maybe that's why we withdrew, because our ancestors knew that mercy was harder than conquest. Maybe they chose exile so they wouldn't become monsters. Eidolon spoke again, cutting through their debate. Warning, long-range sensors detecting Concorde activity. Several fleets are converging on the system. Estimated arrival 6 hours. Elias's stomach nodded. Time was running out. Suddenly, the first stasis pod hissed open. Cold mist spilled onto the floor, swirling around the crew's boots. Inside, a tall man in a deep blue uniform slowly opened his eyes. Disoriented but alert, Eidolon announced, crew member Captain Dorian Calith, rank Commanding Officer, Eclipse Vanguard. The man stepped out of the pod, his movements unsteady but precise. His sharp eyes scanned the crew before fixing on Elias. Dorian, who woke me? Elias straightened his back. I did, Captain Elias Draven, salvage crew, we found this ship and now we know the truth. Dorian's gaze hardened. Then you know what you've done. This isn't just a ship, it's a symbol, and you've just reignited history. Selene stepped forward, her voice full of hope. Captain Calith, humanity has been forgotten. We've been reduced to a minor species under the Concorde's rule. We thought we were weak. We thought we never had power. Dorian's face darkened, but there was a spark of pride in his eyes. Then it's time we remind the galaxy who we are. More pods began to hiss open. Men and women, warriors and scholars, engineers and tacticians, the crew of an empire that had chosen mercy over conquest, were returning to life. Elias felt both exhilarated and terrified. He had set events into motion that could not be undone. Eidolon, Elias said quietly, what happens next? The AI's reply was steady, almost solemn. What happens next, Captain Draven, depends on whether humanity will rise as guardians or return as tyrants. The chamber filled with the sounds of awakening, hissing pods, footsteps of the first to rise, and the faint hum of a ship shaking off 4,000 years of silence. The age of exile was truly ending. As the first of the ancient crew opened their eyes far across the stars, the Concorde trembled at the news of humanity's return. The Celestian Concorde's High Council sat in its grand chamber, a towering spire of crystal and metal orbiting the heart of the Concorde capital. Starlight filtered through translucent walls, casting shifting patterns across the room as representatives of dozens of species argued in rising panic. For centuries, this chamber had been a place of calculated diplomacy and controlled debate. Now it was chaos. Fleet strategist Corvallis Wren, a reptilian officer with polished obsidian scales and cold, golden eyes, stood abruptly, his clawed hand slamming against the table with a sound like shattering glass. Reports are verified, he said, his voice cutting through the uproar. An ancient human warship has awakened. Its energy output exceeds every classification in our database. If this is only the first of many, then the balance of the galaxy is finished. The word human spread unease through the chamber. For generations, humans had been regarded as merchants, colonists, and laborers, useful but small, a people with no real voice. The idea that they once held power beyond imagining was more than unsettling, it was terrifying. Prime Arbiter Elendra, a being of shifting light and energy, rose gracefully. Her voice flowed like a calm river yet carried undeniable authority. We do not yet know their purpose. The humans may not seek war. Our response must be measured. But her plea for patience was drowned out by angry voices. Overlord Jakor, leader of the Hive's war brood, hissed, his jagged mandibles clicking with fury. Measured, you speak of patience while predators awaken among us. You all know the truth. Humanity is a species of conquerors. I will not sit idle while they rise again. His words struck deep, feeding the oldest fear in the chamber, the fear of being prey before a superior predator. Elendra's light flared, her tone sharpened. Do you forget the ancient records? Humanity could have ruled all. They chose not to. They built worlds for others, shared knowledge freely. Their withdrawal was an act of mercy, not conquest. But Jakor sneered, his voice a guttural growl. Mercy or calculation? What if they only slept to strike again when we had grown weak and complacent? The chamber descended into shouting. Some demanded an immediate preemptive strike. Others warned that such an attack would doom them all. Yet beneath the noise was a shared truth. The Concord had built its empire upon human-made worlds, powered by human technology that had endured for millennia. And now the rightful builders had returned. Far away, deep in the asteroid chamber, the crew of the Eclipse Vanguard stood in silence as Eidolon projected the live transmissions of the Council. They watched as beings of power and influence debated the future of humanity without a single human voice present. Ronan Cade clenched his fists, his voice heavy with bitterness. Listen to them. They talk about us like we're monsters, but none of them care how they've treated us for centuries. We've been their workers, their pawns, their shadows. And now they're terrified because they know the truth might come out. Dr. Selene Vera stared at the alien leaders with a mix of sorrow and anger. This is fear laid bare. They built their civilizations on what we left behind. Deep down, they've always known it. Fear twists gratitude into resentment. It's easier to hate those you owe your existence to than to admit you could never match them. Captain Dorian Calith, standing tall despite the weight of centuries newly placed on his shoulders, looked at Elias. His voice carried the tone of someone who had seen this pattern before. This debate is no different than the one we had thousands of years ago. Power invites fear, fear invites hatred, and hatred left unchecked always leads to war. Elias felt a deep unease settling in his chest. For his whole life he had thought humanity weak, insignificant. Now he realized the opposite was true. Humanity's absence had been a choice. An act of restraint so profound that history itself had been rewritten to hide it. He understood now that history was not just what happened, it was what the victors chose to remember. Selene turned to him, her voice softer yet firm with conviction. Elias, power is dangerous, yes, but so is letting others write your story for you. If we remain silent now, we are complicit in our own erasure. Eidolon's voice, calm as ever, interrupted their thoughts. Alert. Multiple Concord fleets converging on this system. Estimated arrival, 5 hours, 32 minutes. Fleet composition, 27 warships, including 3 dreadnoughts. The crew exchanged heavy looks. Kale's voice was grim. There it is. Their fear just became action. We've woken something they can't control, and they won't stop until they destroy us. Selene's gaze held both sorrow and resolve. Then maybe it's time to prove that mercy is not weakness. That power, held with restraint, is stronger than any weapon they fear. Elias felt the truth in her words. Power alone could terrify, but how they used it would decide the future, not just for humanity, but for every species in the galaxy. Outside, the Eclipse Vanguard's hull glowed brighter as systems came online, ancient engines humming like the breath of a god awakening from self-imposed exile. The galaxy, built on human creations, was trembling, and history's forgotten builders were no longer silent. While fear spread among alien leaders aboard the Vanguard, the returning humans reflected on the past, and why they had once stepped away from power. The corridors of the Eclipse Vanguard glimmered softly as ancient systems reawakened. The hum of power resonated through its walls like a heartbeat, steady and deliberate. Stasis pods hissed open, releasing curls of mist that drifted across the floor in pale ribbons. One by one, men and women stepped out, their eyes blinking against the unfamiliar glow of the present. These were not just soldiers, they were living relics of a civilization that had once shaped the galaxy. Among them was Dr. Aria Solen, the ship's chief science officer. Her dark eyes scanned the chamber, and though millennia had passed, there was no fear in her gaze, only recognition, as though she had always known this moment would come. Slowly, she approached a holographic display where Eidolon had projected a map of the galaxy. Stars glittered across the image, marked with borders that meant little to her. So many of these territories had been carved from worlds humanity itself had once given life. Idolin, Arya said softly, her voice steady but heavy with memory. How many of our creations remain inhabited? Of the 1,040 terraform systems humanity once forged, Idolin replied, its tone almost reverent, 432 remain inhabited. None of these worlds acknowledge human authorship. Selene stepped closer, staring at the star map as if seeing the galaxy for the first time. Her voice trembled with anger and sorrow. We gave them everything, worlds that could sustain them, technology to end famine and disease. We brought them out of darkness, and now they act as if we never existed. Arya's expression didn't change, but her voice grew quieter, edged with something deeper than bitterness. We gave freely because we believed in building a better future. We never asked for loyalty or worship. But this is what happens when gifts are forgotten. They become taken for granted until those who gave them are erased from the story entirely. Ronan, standing off to the side, clenched his hands into fists. And after all that, they treat us as if we're weak, as if we were nothing more than workers in their grand empire. They built everything on our legacy and then buried our name to hide their debt. Arya turned to face him, her gaze unwavering. Perhaps that is why humanity withdrew. We had seen enough to know that power cannot coexist with gratitude for long. The ones we uplifted would always fear the hand that raised them, and so we chose to leave not out of cowardice but out of morality. It was the only way to prevent us from becoming tyrants. Selene looked at Arya, her eyes wide with a painful kind of understanding. And yet, by stepping back, we allowed them to rewrite the story. They made us small so they could feel secure in their own greatness. Fear outlived gratitude. Elias stood apart, staring at the star map. His own reflection shimmered against the holographic image of human-made worlds now ruled by others. For the first time in his life, he truly felt the enormity of what had been lost, not just power, but the meaning of power. It dawned on him that true strength had never been humanity's ability to dominate. It had been their ability to walk away, even when they could have claimed everything. That act of restraint had been their highest virtue. Kale's voice broke the silence. So we gave them everything and they gave us chains, that's the truth of it. Selene shook her head slowly. Not chains, Kale, just a world built on forgetting, and when the powerful forget their debt, they convince themselves they never owed one. Arya looked at Elias then, her voice clear and firm. This ship, this crew, we are proof that mercy once triumphed over ambition. The question now is whether that same restraint still lives in us. Because if it doesn't, then everything humanity sacrificed will have been for nothing. The words sank into Elias's heart like iron. Outside, the massive hull of the Eclipse Vanguard glowed brighter as systems fully awakened. The ancient vessel, once a symbol of humanity's unmatched power, now felt like a mirror, reflecting the choice that lay before them. They could take back everything in an instant. But should they? In the quiet hum of the ship, in the soft light of countless awakening pods, the weight of history pressed down on every soul present. The galaxy trembled at their return, yet the true test of humanity's greatness was not whether they could rule again, but whether they would remember why they chose not to. But history does not wait for reflection. Soon, the first test of humanity's renewed power arrived. The Eclipse Vanguard drifted silently at the edge of the asteroid field, its colossal frame glowing faintly as more of its ancient systems came online. Far across the stars, Concord fleets converged on the system. 27 warships, including 3 dreadnoughts, moved with grim determination. To them, this was not diplomacy, it was containment. Inside the command chamber, Idolin's voice resonated calmly. Multiple fleets approaching. Estimated time to arrival, 5 hours. Concord vessels are preparing for confrontation. Their communications indicate they see this ship as an unlawful threat. Captain Elias Draven stared at the projections, his jaw tight. The holographic map displayed a web of red icons closing in on their position. They've already decided we're the enemy, he muttered. Captain Dorian Calith, now fully recovered from stasis, placed a steady hand on the console. His eyes were sharp, but his voice carried a calm certainty. They see power they cannot match. Fear always breeds aggression. This was inevitable. Dr. Selene Vera turned to him, her brow furrowed. So what do? We can fight, yes, but that only proves their worst fears about us. Arya Solen stepped forward, her face calm despite the tension in the room. Perhaps it's not about what we can do, but what we choose not to do. If we respond with mercy, even in the face of hostility, we show them that restraint is not weakness. It is strength of the highest order. Kale frowned. And if they don't listen, if they fire first, Dorian looked at him. Then we disable them without killing. Let them see the difference between power as tyranny and power as guardianship. Moments later, Idolin's voice sharpened. Incoming transmission from the Aegis Revenant. They are under attack by Concord fleets in the nearby Persean Reach. The chamber shifted to a live projection. The Aegis Revenant, another awakened human vessel, faced 3 Concord fleets. Dreadnoughts and destroyers poured fire into its shields, fire that simply vanished on impact. The Revenant did not retaliate with overwhelming force. Instead, it fired single, precise bursts of energy that disabled weapons, engines, and shields, leaving enemy ships powerless but intact. On the Vanguard's bridge, Ronan stared in disbelief. They could wipe them out in seconds, but they are holding back. Dorian allowed himself a faint smile. This is who we once were, the power to end wars in minutes and the wisdom to choose not to. Seleni's eyes softened as she watched the battle unfold. Concord ships drifted helplessly, their crews unharmed but utterly outmatched. The battle ended in minutes without a single life lost. Area. For thousands of years we were feared as conquerors, but this is what set us apart. Power does not corrupt when it is tempered by conscience. Our ancestors understood that. That is why they stepped away. Elias felt the truth settle heavily in his chest. The ship beneath him, the crew awakening around him, they were not weapons of domination. They were reminders that the greatest strength is knowing when not to strike. Idolin's voice broke the silence. Captain Draven, the Concord fleets will arrive soon. Their weapons will be ineffective. The choice is yours. How will humanity greet the galaxy that forgot it? Elias looked at his crew, at the faces of people who had once chosen exile over tyranny. He realized that the decision he made now would define not just how the Concord saw humanity, but how humanity saw itself. For the first time, Elias understood that their return was not about reclaiming power. It was about proving once again that restraint is the highest form of strength. The outcome of that battle proved something far greater than military strength. It showed a different kind of power, one born of restraint. The Eclipse Vanguard vibrated softly as its engines fully awakened, a deep hum echoing through the vast chamber like the heartbeat of a titan. On the main display, the holographic star map pulsed with countless blue markers, human worlds, stations, and fortresses that had lain dormant for millennia. Idolin spoke with measured clarity. Long-range awakening signals confirmed. Human installations within 50 light-years are coming online. Estimated activation: 17 major bases, over 300 smaller outposts, and 40 vessels of various classes. The crew stared in awe. The galaxy that had long forgotten humanity was now seeing the slow re-emergence of its former architects. High Marshal Corian Valan, once a legendary strategist, stood on the bridge, fully awake and commanding once more. His presence alone radiated quiet authority, the kind born of both experience and conviction. He studied the map carefully before speaking, his voice calm but unyielding. We don't need to fire a single shot. Nearly half of the Concord's infrastructure relies on technology we created. Their power rests on foundations they don't even understand anymore. We can reclaim our legacy without destruction because they need us more than they realize. Ronan Cade frowned, crossing his arms. You mean to just hold their worlds hostage? Shut everything down until they beg to listen? Corian turned to face him, his expression resolute. Not hostage, justice. We gave them life, stability, and knowledge without asking for tribute or rule. They repaid us by erasing our name from history. Now they must acknowledge the truth. Their civilizations stand because of us. We do not have to kill them to remind them of that. Dr. Arya Solen added softly, a gift without gratitude becomes entitlement. Perhaps this is the lesson the galaxy needs most, to understand that creation carries weight and that power, even shared freely, must still be respected. Selene stepped forward, looking at the awakening star map with both wonder and unease. But if we shut down what we built, aren't we punishing innocent people, the ones who never knew the truth? Corian nodded slowly. That is why we choose carefully. We won't take lives. We will only remind their leaders that peace exists because of the foundations we gave them. If they accept partnership, the lights stay on. If not, they can see how fragile their power truly is without us. Elias watched in silence, feeling the weight of Corian's words. It wasn't vengeance, it wasn't conquest. It was a new kind of power, a form of authority that did not need weapons to dominate. Kale muttered under his breath, half in disbelief. We can change the galaxy without firing a single shot. That's more terrifying than any fleet. Eidolon displayed new data, dozens of Concorde fleets changing course as reports of awakening human installations spread across the galaxy. Panic rippled through their governments as they realized how dependent they were on the very species they had dismissed for centuries. Corian looked at Elias, his expression firm. You see, Captain Draven, true strength isn't in how many ships you can destroy. It's in how many you can protect, even when you hold the power to do otherwise. The truth settled heavily on Elias. For so long he had believed that strength was what others took from you. But now, standing on the bridge of the Eclipse Vanguard, he finally understood. The greatest power of all was not the ability to conquer. It was the ability to choose not to, yet not all would accept this lesson. Among the galaxy's voices of fear, one rose louder than the rest: the Hive. The command chamber of the Eclipse Vanguard was silent except for the soft hum of awakened systems. Then Eidolon's voice broke through. Alert! Incoming transmission, origin, Hive collective flagship, designation unknown. The main display shifted to reveal Overlord Jakor, a towering insectoid figure with glistening mandibles and eyes that burned with unyielding hatred. His voice scraped like metal on stone. Humans, you are an existential threat to all life. You will surrender your ships and technology, or the Hive will purge every last one of you from existence. A heavy silence fell on the bridge. High Marshal Corian Valan stepped forward, his tone calm, almost pitying. Overlord, humanity has no wish for war. We only wish to reclaim our name and our place in the galaxy. Jakor's mandibles clacked furiously. Lies, we remember your empire of machines, your fleets that could blot out suns. The galaxy lived in fear of you. You are destroyers, and we will not wait for you to become so again. Before Elias could respond, Eidolon interrupted. Hive fleets detected, estimated strength over 1,000 vessels. They will arrive within minutes, weapons hot. Kale cursed under his breath, gripping the railing. They're not here to talk, they've already chosen war. Elias felt his chest tighten. For all their talk of restraint, for all their belief in mercy. Reality was here. The Hive would not be swayed by words. The holographic map filled with red icons as the Hive fleet emerged from hyperspace, surrounding the asteroid field like a swarm of predators. Jakor, one ship cannot stand against the Hive. We will tear you apart piece by piece. Elias stood taller, his voice steady even as fear threatened to take hold. Eidolon, defend without killing, disable, don't destroy. Acknowledged. Outside. The Eclipse Vanguard came alive. The vast black hull glowed with cascading blue light as its weapons deployed. The Hive opened fire, thousands of energy blasts, missiles, and kinetic slugs hurtled toward the Vanguard. Every strike vanished against the ship's shimmering shields, absorbed and converted into power. Ronan's eyes widened in disbelief. They're feeding us energy, they don't even realize it. Then, with surgical precision, the Vanguard responded. Single beams of light lanced out, disabling Hive ships one by one. Weapons fell silent, engines died. The battlefield became eerily quiet as vessel after vessel drifted, powerless yet intact. Jakor's furious voice rang through the comms. Impossible, nothing survives the swarm. Arya Solen stepped closer to the display, her voice calm, almost sorrowful. Overlord, this is why humanity withdrew. Fighting us was never war, it was slaughter. And we refused to become what you feared. The Hive fleets were broken, not destroyed, but rendered helpless. In less than 10 minutes, the battle was over. Selene turned to Elias, her expression a mixture of awe and unease. We just defeated over 1,000 ships without taking a single life. Do you realize what this means? They can't fight us, but if we choose wrong, they will never forgive us. Elias looked out at the drifting Hive vessels on the display. For all their aggression, they were not monsters, only terrified beings who could not accept the idea of mercy tied to power. In that moment, Elias understood that the true danger wasn't humanity's strength, it was what they would decide to do with it next. The Hive's defeat shook the galaxy to its core, forcing every Concorde government to confront a reality they had long denied. The Hive fleet drifted powerless in the void, thousands of vessels silenced without a single shot meant to kill. On the Eclipse Vanguard's bridge, the crew stood in tense quiet, the enormity of what they had just done pressing down on them. Eidolon's voice broke the silence. Overlord Jakor has terminated transmission. Multiple Concorde governments are broadcasting emergency meetings. Fear is spreading across every major system. Selene turned to Elias, her face pale but resolute. We showed them what we can do. Now the question is, what will we choose to be? Elias didn't answer immediately. He stared at the holographic display of the galaxy where hundreds of blue markers, human installations and fleets awakening now pulsed like stars being born. Moments later, Prime Arbiter Elendra's image appeared, her luminous form flickering slightly as if she struggled to contain the weight of her words. Human commanders. You have made your point. The Concord can no longer pretend you are weak or insignificant, but the fear you have awakened is vast. Some call for peace, others call for war. High Marshal Corian Valen stepped forward, his voice even and firm. We have no interest in conquest, but we will not return to silence while others write lies about who we are. We built the foundations of this galaxy. It is time that truth is acknowledged. Elendra's form pulsed faintly. And if the Concord refuses? Corian looked directly at her. Then we remind them how fragile their power truly is, not with weapons, but with the truth that their worlds still live because of us. A quiet murmur spread across the bridge. The idea was simple yet overwhelming. Humanity could disable entire civilizations not by war but by withdrawing the technology they had gifted long ago. Seleni's voice was soft, but it carried conviction. We gave them life. If we must, we can show them what the galaxy looks like without our gifts. But we offer partnership first, equality, not subjugation. Eidolon projected a new map, dozens of Concord fleets shifting position, many holding back after news of the Hive's defeat. Panic was spreading, but so was hesitation. Some species had begun calling for dialogue rather than battle. Elias finally spoke, his voice steady. The future we write today will decide if humanity becomes the tyrant they fear or the ally they never believed we could be. We cannot undo their fear, but we can choose not to justify it. Corian nodded. Then we give them a choice, accept partnership or see what happens when the architects of the galaxy take back their legacy. Elendra's glow softened, a sign of understanding. If you mean what you say, if you truly desire peace, not dominance, then there may yet be hope for new accord, but there are many who will never accept you. Elias's expression hardened. They don't have to accept us, they only have to learn that we will no longer kneel. Around them, the displays filled with messages from newly awakened human fleets, captains and admirals who had waited millennia for the day humanity would return. For the first time in thousands of years, humanity was not asking for permission to exist. They were reclaiming the truth of who they were, builders, protectors, and a species powerful enough to shape destiny, yet wise enough to remember why they once stepped away. And so, as new alliances began to form and old lies crumbled, humanity stood at the threshold of a future still unwritten. Weeks passed, the galaxy was no longer the same. On every major world, the story of humanity's return spread like wildfire. What had once been myth was now undeniable truth. The civilizations of the Concord had been built on human-made foundations, worlds terraformed by human hands, technologies developed by human minds. Entire histories had been rewritten to erase that legacy. Now, the truth could no longer be hidden. High Marshal Corian Valen became the face of the reawakened human fleet, not as a conqueror, but as a negotiator. One by one, moderate species came forward, willing to sign a new accord of equals. The terms were simple: recognition of humanity's rightful heritage, open collaboration on shared technology, and the promise that no species would again be reduced to subjugation. Not every government agreed. The Hive remained defiant, unwilling to accept a galaxy where humans walked as equals. But even they understood the reality: war was meaningless when the outcome was already decided. Selene worked with Dr. Arya Solen to create the Institute for Galactic Knowledge Exchange, a place where technology, medicine, and science could be shared freely. For the first time in millennia, progress no longer meant fear, it meant cooperation. Ronan, once a tired scavenger, found himself leading the construction of new hybrid starships, combining human and alien engineering. Kale became commander of the Vanguard's defense forces, vowing that humanity would never again allow itself to be diminished or erased. Elias stood on the bridge of the Eclipse Vanguard, looking out at the endless stars. The ship was no longer just a relic of the past, it was the vanguard of a new age. Eidolon's voice came softly, like the echo of history itself. All systems report normal, human space is secure. The Concord has begun to recognize our terms, but there are still uncharted regions beyond known space. Elias placed a hand on the command console, his eyes fixed on the shimmering expanse ahead. Then that's where we go. We've reclaimed our past, but the future isn't here. It's out there, waiting for us to find it. Corian stepped up beside him, his gaze steady. We once built the galaxy. Now we have the chance to do better, to build not as rulers but as partners." Selene smiled faintly, her voice carrying a quiet hope. Perhaps this time power will mean something greater than fear. Outside, the Eclipse Vanguard turned slowly, engines glowing as it set a course beyond mapped stars. Behind it, thousands of awakened human ships formed a fleet, not to conquer, but to protect, to explore, to remember. As the ship leapt into the unknown, Elias felt a profound truth settle in his heart. Humanity's strength had never been its weapons. It had been its choice to wield power with conscience, to remember that true greatness is measured not by domination but by mercy. And now, after 4,000 years, humanity had returned not to rule but to lead by example. The stars ahead shimmered with promise. The story of humanity was no longer over. It was only beginning again. Humanity's return to the stars was not a story of conquest. It was a story of memory, of restraint, and of choosing a better path even when holding unimaginable power. After 4,000 years, the truth could no longer be buried. The galaxy had been built on the foundations of human creation, and now its forgotten architects had awakened. But this was only the beginning. What lies beyond the borders of known space? What challenges and wonders await a civilization that once shaped the stars themselves? And can humanity truly hold to its ideals of mercy and partnership when fear and ambition still linger in the hearts of others, and in their own? Tell us what you think. If you held the power to change the course of history, would you choose restraint as they did, or would you take back everything that was lost? Share your thoughts in the comments, because the next chapter of humanity's story may depend on the choices you believe we should make.